Well, I've stalled on this long enough. Let's do this. It's kinda crazy to think it's been 7 years since I started this video marathon through the Crash Bandicoot games. Well, technically 10 if you count my first attempt, which I personally don't count. A lot can change in that time span, and a lot has. To name an example, whatever grudge I had against Crash 1 back in 2020 is long gone nowadays. I didn't even bother 100%ing the game this time around because it just got too stressful trying to get all of the gems. How my younger self was able to pull this off, I'll never know. I say as I've 100% of the game multiple times since that video. Crash 1's great, and 2020 me had a serious skill issue. But yeah, it's been quite a journey going through this series in video form. Plenty of highs, plenty of lows, plenty of shrugs, you know how it is. And while it's taken longer than I originally intended for me to get around to these, my last Crash review was 3 years ago, oof. At long last, it's finally time for me to talk about two of the most infamous games in the series, Crash the Titans and Crash Mind Over Mutant. Released in 2007 and 2008 respectively on a multitude of platforms, and both developed by Radical Entertainment, Titans and Mind Over Mutant were, for many years, the final games in the Crash series, delisted mobile games aside, and they were divisive to say the least. Both games got decent reviews from critics, but they were not well liked by a lot of the fan base. I was really starting to use the internet more around the time Titans came out, and I distinctly remember seeing a lot of forum talk about how bad these games looked. Now granted, in the years since, I have seen a fair few people give them more credit, but as a whole, Titans and Mind Over Mutant aren't really the most fondly looked upon Crash games. As for my history on these games, I actually skipped Titans when it came out. That comment I made about how a lot of Crash fans thought it looked bad, yeah, I was one of them. 10-year-old me was definitely guilty of the different equals bad mindset here, because I saw those redesigns as a kid and immediately was like, nope, I don't want to play it. Now that said, I did give Mind Over Mutant a chance when it came out, but while I did like parts of it, I overall wasn't a fan. I did eventually get Titans as well years later, but full disclosure, never actually finished it before playing it for this video. Every time I tried it, I'd get decently far and then just kinda fall off. All that to say, my younger self was not fond of these games. But hey, opinions can change as you get older, so I think it's about time I give both of these games a proper chance and see how they hold up. But before we get to the games themselves, I want to address some stuff about them, and how I plan on approaching reviewing them. So firstly, let's talk about why they're so different. Because yeah, in a lot of ways, Titans and Mind Over Mutant are very much departures from the Crash norm, gameplay-wise, visually, and to a degree, tonally. It's to a point that these games are often viewed as a soft reboot of sorts. It largely keeps the same continuity, even acknowledging previous games, but otherwise does things a lot differently. Now, as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been a concrete reason publicly given to why this pivot happened, but I'm willing to take a guess off what we do know. Prior to making Titans, Radical Entertainment had developed Crash Tag Team Racing, and despite that game getting pretty mixed reception, it was, from what I could find, the best-selling Crash game in a while, and by a pretty wide margin too. It reportedly sold 3.7 million copies, the most of any Crash game since Wrath of Cortex, which given this comment into insanity, tells you a lot about how dire things were.
Well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and... Fish?
All that to say, it was apparent that the series' usual song and dance wasn't selling in the 2000s. 3D platformers in general were having a bit of an identity shift during this time. Most of them were trying to do more than what the genre was doing in the 90s. Some more spitefully than others. And one of the most popular trends for 3D platformers at the time was incorporating beat-em-up combat. This was the era of Devil May Cry and God of War, and a lot of 3D platformers wanted a piece of that pie. Newer ones like Vex and Kaya Dark Lineage were trying this, but even established franchises were trying this too. Games like Ty the Tasmanian Tiger 3, Pac-Man World 3, The Legend of Spyro Trilogy, and Sonic Unleashed all had beat-em-up combat. It was the hot new thing at the time, so it's not too surprising they tried the same with Crash. If anything, it's a bit surprising they didn't darken the tone. This was also the era where a lot of 3D platformers were getting darker and edgier, but that wasn't the case with Crash. They stuck to their cartoony roots, albeit a different flavor of it. So in a nutshell, Titans and Mind Over Mutant were, from the looks of it, an attempt to give the Crash series a bit of a refresh, a way to keep the series relevant to what was currently popular at the time. A classic case of trend chasing, if you will. Now what does this all mean regarding this video? Well, for one, that I probably spend way too much time thinking about gaming history, but in terms of reviewing these games, I'm not going to hold the fact that these games are different against them. I've previously heard the argument that Titans and Minor Mutant are fine as games, but not good Crash games, and I personally don't want to take that kind of stance. Just because they're different from Crash's usual way of doing things doesn't make them bad Crash games by default. It could be jarring for sure, but on paper at least, I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with a series, especially a long-running one, trying something different. The execution is what matters here, and heck, some series have benefited from trying something different. Now, this doesn't mean I won't make any comparisons to the previous games in this, but I'll be keeping them minimal. These games are largely trying to do their own thing, so I'm going to judge them on their own merits. Now, with all that said, let's finally get started with the first of this duology, Crash of the Titans. Specifically the PS2 version, for those curious. The game's story begins with the Bandicoot family having an ordinary day at their home on Wumpa Island. Wait, Wumpa Island? I used to think this was just a renaming of Insanity Island, but no, this is apparently supposed to be the second island from Crash 1. I guess they got tired of dealing with Papu Papu's tribe and decided to move? Anyway, they're having an ordinary day, Coco's building a device to recycle butter, don't worry about it, when Cortex rolls in on his blimp to cause him trouble. He kidnaps Coco and Aku Aku and freezes Crunch, but Crash manages to get Aku Aku free with the butter machine. Once the two reunite, they decide to go after Cortex, and soon discover that he's collecting an energy source called Mojo to create a new army of super mutants known as Titans, which he plans to use to build a doomsday robot that'll destroy Wumpa Island.
And I shall call this robot the Doominator!
Yeah! That name sucks!
You were building a butter recycling machine, Coco. You have no room to talk. After failing to get rid of Crash, Cortex makes his escape, but this ends up being one failure too many, as Uka Uka says enough is enough, and finally gives Cortex the boot, replacing him with Nina. Yeah, Nina's the villain this time. It's kind of wild seeing just how quickly she ended up sticking as part of the main cast. From mid-game boss in Crash Purple, to playable in Twinsanity and Tag Team, to now being the main threat. Good for her. From there, Nina puts a brainwashed Coco in charge of making the Doominator, while Crash and Aku Aku make their way towards stopping Nina and saving Coco, facing off with Tiny Tiger, Engine, and Uka Uka along the way. It's a pretty straightforward story, with more of a focus on the dialogue than the narrative, aside from Nina hijacking Cortex's plans, of course. Now, Titans was not only developed by the same studio as Tag Team Racing, but both games have the same writer, Chris Mitchell. And for those who may not know or remember, I love Tag Team's writing. Not every joke it does lands for me, but as a whole, I think it's a really funny game.
And brush your teeth. Looks like a checkerboard in there.
My wife will take my kids. She'll marry my brother. I can't go through that again!
I'm telling Mom! If we had one.
Darren would like to thank no one. He did it all himself.
I will drop a bomb right in your face for this.
So with that in mind, I was hoping Titans would tickle my funny bone the same way Tag Team does, but unfortunately it really didn't. It does have a similar style of humor as Tag Team, and to give some credit, there are a couple decent jokes here and there.
Surrender to Cortex!
Make a sucker!
Hey, genius, I can't actually hear you.
But as a whole, I don't think Titans is really that funny. I only ended up laughing a couple times during my playthrough, and even then, they were more so chuckles rather than full-on guffawing. If anything, I was more often left feeling uncomfortable by some of these jokes. Now don't get me wrong, the Crash series is no stranger to occasionally more adult humor, but even with that in mind, some of Titans' jokes just felt kinda gross and, in a couple cases, actually concerning.
You did it, Crash! Thanks, big brother!
Oh, gross. Get a room.
You know what that phrase means, right?
Oh, Nina. Betraying me is the most vile, evil thing you could have ever done. You were a skank.
You know what that phrase means, right? It's odd because, again, this is the same writer as Tag Team, a game I think is really funny, so I'm not entirely sure what happened here. Now, to give some credit, I do like the little conversations the basic enemies will sometimes have before they notice you. I don't think they're outright funny, but they add a bit of personality to the various mooks, and I think that's neat.
Why are we here? Boss lady looking for Bandicoot. Bandicoot come to stop us make boom things.
Why we make boom things?
We make boom things for boss lady's robot. Biggest boom thing of all.
Boom things fun!
Boom thing!
Also, like with Tag Team, Engine was the highlight of the game's writing. Granted, I don't think he's as consistently funny here as he was in Tag Team, but the few times I did chuckle while playing were mostly because of Engine, and I'm sure a lot of that comes down to Nolan North's insane voice performance.
Attention, revolting yet beloved, no monkey servants. Tomorrow is make your child work in the court day. Be sure to bring your many rat-like offspring so we can make them do work considered unsafe for robots. Attention disgusting tomb monkeys. Crash Bandicoot is loose in the facility. Please take a moment to look around your workspace. If you find a Bandicoot, please drop huge bombs on him! Please note, company pensions have been cancelled in favor of Bagel Wednesdays. That is all.
Actually, while we're talking about the characters, let's address the big elephant in the room. Or rather, the shell-elephant. So easily the most infamous aspect of Titans, as I alluded to earlier, was the character redesigns. As described by the game's producer, Kirsten Forbes, in an interview, Radical Entertainment wanted the series cast in a unified style, to make them all feel like they were part of the same universe, which I don't think the series really had an issue with, but I digress. While also giving a modern punk edge, as she put it. And to say this direction didn't click well with fans would be putting it lightly. A lot of the Crash fandom hated these redesigns, and from what I've seen, a fair few still do. Now, like I said earlier, I wrote off Titans as a kid because I didn't like the redesigns either. I thought they were too different. But that was almost 20 years ago, so I'm gonna give these makeovers another chance and see how I feel about them now. Starting off with Crash himself, I actually kind of like this design. It's not one of my favorite looks for him, but it's not a bad look for him either. The best Crash designs for me are the ones that hit that mix of goofy, affectionately trying too hard to be cool, and kind of adorable scrimblow. And I think the Titans design hits that balance pretty well. For the longest time, I never really got why they gave him tribal tattoos on his hands, but you know what? It finally made sense to me when I thought about it like this. Fingerless gloves were a very 90s thing, and updating his design for the 2000s, they decided to apply a very 2000s thing. Plus, the tattoo patterns apply to the Titan enemies when you take control of them, which I think is a cool visual touch. And before anyone mentions that tattoos on fur isn't realistic, this is a mutant bandicoot with genes. Please expand your suspension of disbelief. But yeah, I've overall warmed up to Crash's redesign. I think it works well here. As for the other redesigns, something about Cortex's eyes feel a teeny off to me, but as a whole, I think he looks fine. I'm not huge on Aku Aku being more stretched out like this, but it does work better for how he's used in gameplay, so I can let it slide. Crunch feels a bit off, I think it's mainly the face and hair, but he's barely in the game, so I can let that one slide too. The two redesigns I actually quite like, aside from Crash, are Engine's and Nina's. The sort of sickly blues and grays they have for Engine I think worked for the more Igor-ish angle they were taking him at the time, and I'm gonna be real, I think I actually prefer this look for Nina over her original design. Like, don't get me wrong, her original design is good, but I don't know. I think the blue skin and sticky up hair work for her. Now, one redesign I'm kinda mixed on is Uka Uka's. I think it's pretty neat as a design, though the lack of a jaw is a little bit odd, but I'm sorry, this is the one design I can't shake off that this is too different feeling. It just feels like too much of a departure from Uka Uka's look. Again, it is a cool design, but I think I'd prefer it for a new character. Which, hey, they kinda did that with Oppo Oppo in CTR Nitro Fueled. But yeah, as a whole, the Titans redesigns are kind of a mixed bag, but not really as bad as I remember them being. But you may have noticed there's two I haven't mentioned yet. That be because those are the two redesigns I actively dislike, which we'll go over now. Firstly, Coco. I really don't like Coco's design in this game. Not because she doesn't look like Coco or anything, it's clearly her, but it's the head. The giant bobblehead proportions they gave her, I can't get used to it. It's like she's got the head of a Funko Pop. The eyes don't help, something about them feel really off to me, but it's mostly the head proportions that really bug me. And then there's Tiny Tiger. This is probably the most infamous redesign of them all, and yeah, I really don't like this design, but not for the reason you may be thinking. Like, yes, it is a very big departure from Tiny's usual look, but that's not my main problem with it. My main problem is that he doesn't match the art style. All the characters in Titans have a very distinct cartoony look to them, particularly in their faces and expressions. But Tiny, for some reason, just doesn't. He looks too much like a real tiger. Legit, any cutscene he's in, he feels super out of place. Like he's a guest character from a completely different universe. Ironic, given Kirsten Forbes said they want all the characters to feel unified with the redesigns. But yeah, Coco and Tiny are the only redesigns in Titans that I actively dislike. The others range from ones I like to definitely better than my thoughts on them as a kid though, that's for sure. But while we're talking character designs, I will give more credit where it's due. The new Titan enemies? They look pretty cool. Some of my personal favorite Titan designs would be the Ratsicle, the Shellelephant, the Snipe, and the Yuctopus. But the ones I didn't mention aren't slouches either. Though while we're on the topic of the Titans, I think now's a good time to start talking about the gameplay. As I noted earlier, Crash the Titans forgoes being a traditional mainline Crash game in favor of being a beat-em-up platformer. And once again, it being different is not an inherent issue, so I'll be keeping comparisons to the classic Crash games to a minimum. With that said, how does it fare with this new direction? I wouldn't say this game is bad, but it ended up being pretty underwhelming for the most part. In terms of being a platformer, it's fairly linear with a couple of branching off points, usually for optional goodies, with the actual platforming being relatively basic. In terms of movement, Crash has his usual jump and double jump, but now also gets a backflip, a high jump out of his spin attack, and a spinning hover move of sorts. There's not many opportunities to put that backflip or high jump to use, but they love making you use that hover. You will use that move a lot in this game to cover gaps. They also love having you jump off trampoline platforms, the kind where you get a ton of height if you press jump at the right time, but they're oddly finicky. Like, near the end of the game, if I didn't get the timing pixel perfect, Crash would just start doing the spin hover out of the jump, even though I wasn't pressing the spin button. I don't know, it was weird. But yeah, the platforming in Titans is pretty bare bones. There's only a couple parts in the game where it really feels like there's an actual challenge, and they're not even particularly hard ones. And that's when they actually include any platforming. There's a fair few points of the game where you just run forward with barely anything going on. Sometimes they'll have some crates or decor to destroy, or they'll at least aim the camera to give you an establishing shot of where you're going. But sometimes they give you nothing. Just an empty path or corridor to run down with nothing going on, and it's boring. There is admittedly a bit of funny irony here, because Naughty Dog came up with the idea of crates and Wumpa Fruit for the first Crash game specifically to address levels feeling too empty, and now here we have Titans falling in that exact same pit. Now sometimes they'll put you in these downhill portions where you use Aku Aku as a surfboard, kind of like those levels in Twinsanity where you use Cortex as one, and these do start off strong. The Aku Aku board feels good to control, you're actually able to stop and turn around if you want to go back for something you missed, thank goodness, and early on at least, these set pieces are well paced and pretty fun. But over the course of the game, they go a bit overboard with this mechanic, and barring a couple exceptions, the level design for them starts to weaken. Legit, there's a few times where they have you use the board for like 2 seconds. Was that necessary? You are also able to manually pull out the board and use it basically whenever, but admittedly, I kept forgetting you could do that. Probably should have used it for those boring corridor sections in hindsight. But yeah, the board mechanic's neat, and while it does overstay its welcome a bit by the end, the moments where it's used well are solid. Though the best set piece using it is in the level you first get the ability, where you have to fight a mob of enemies while surfing around in a bowl. Genuinely, this part is really fun. Having said that, I should probably get into the combat side of this game. It's a classic style beat 'em up. You'll be fighting hordes of mooks with punches and kicks. In particular, the game uses the staple light attack, heavy attack system. You've also got a block and a dodge roll out of the block, but I honestly didn't use them much, and I'll go into why in a bit. You don't start with many combat moves, but as you collect mojo, you unlock more attacks, including the trademark spin attack. Though the spin attack's weird in this game. Firstly, you spin the control stick and then mash square to use it. Makes sense on paper, feels a bit odd to do though. But the main thing is that if you spin for too long, Crash gets dizzy and leaves himself open for attack. I get it, you don't want the attack to be overpowered in a beat 'em up scenario, and you do eventually get upgrades that increase your maximum spin time. My problem is that the game doesn't really communicate when you're running out of spin time. You basically have to guesstimate whenever you use it, so you inevitably end up using it too long, get dizzy, get hit as a result, and eventually just stop taking your chances with using the spin attack. Even something as simple as an audio cue or Crash's model getting more red as you're nearing overusage, I think that would have helped a lot. But as is, I largely just stopped using it partway in, only really using it as a desperate crowd control tool. Not that you'll really need to, because for most of the game, you're not going to need most of your combat moves. Basic enemies for like 2/3 of the game are very easily taken out by just mashing the basic light attack combo. And the game doesn't have anything like Devil May Cry's style system or Sparked Electric Gesture 3's damage multiplier, something to incentivize changing up the moves you use or keeping your combo going. So just mash away until they're all knocked out. Now this does change up closer to the end when the basic enemies get more health and more threatening attacks. That's when I actually started using other moves and, well, having more fun. But it did feel a bit too little too late. Though of course, that's not the only combat element at play, because Crash the Titans' main gameplay gimmick is, well, the Titans. Instead of knocking them out like regular enemies, attacking Titans fills up a stun bar, and once it's full and you've left them stunned, you can take control of them and use their abilities yourself, sometimes to help you through the level a bit, but more often than not for combat scenarios. So fighting the Titans as Crash is a bit of a different beast, as they've got far more devastating attacks compared to the basic mooks, and they can block, requiring a charged heavy attack to break their guard. This is clunky, both because the windup is long and easily interruptible, and because if you start holding triangle too early, the game registers it as an uncharged heavy attack, which will do nothing and just leave you super vulnerable. This process is also clearly designed around one-on-one situations, where it's just you versus the Titan you're trying to stun, and in the cases where you are just fighting one-on-one, it overall works fine enough. Except you're usually not fighting one-on-one. A majority of the fights in this game, you're going to be dealing with multiple Titans at the same time. And good luck if even 2 Titans decide to attack you at the same time. Crash's toolkit is just not well equipped to deal with more than 1 Titan at a time. Even the block only blocks the Titan's basic attacks. So if one of them starts using heavy or special attacks, you're donezo. You also can't interrupt your attack animations with the block button. You have to wait until it's done before the block activates. So more often than not, you're going to get hit mid-attack before you even have a chance to block. Now all that said, how do things play out when you do take control of a Titan? Well, it's a mixed bag. To give credit, they don't nerf the Titans when you're in control. All their abilities as enemies are usable. And while there is a fair bit of overlap in archetypes, each one does at least have something to call their own, whether it be their special attacks or other specific properties. Ratsicle's special attack freezes enemies in place, Magmadon can walk through lava, Rhino Roller can curl into a ball and roll around, devastating most anything in its path, to name a few examples. Unfortunately, with each Titan having a limited move pool and not much usage outside of combat, this part gets kinda repetitive too. More often than not, you're just gonna be back to mashing square and occasionally using a heavy attack or special attack. Or you do what I do. Hijack a Titan, use its special attack to instantly stun another Titan, immediately jump to that Titan, which also insta-kills the one you just abandoned, keep chaining until all Titans are taken care of. The game also runs off what it calls a food chain system, where you're incentivized to use Titans to climb your way up to getting stronger Titans. But that ultimately just adds to that repetitive feeling. A lot of the combat scenarios boil down to stun and take control of smaller Titan, use smaller Titan to stun and take control of larger Titan. Use larger Titan to wipe out everything. And while making a giant mutant destroy everything is fun initially, that power trip does eventually wear off and get kinda boring. Now that said, the one Titan where I feel like they had something good going for it in terms of the combat is Sludge. Which is funny because the first time I encountered Sludge, I hated it. Its basic attack has long range, and it has a fast-hitting uppercut attack that it does from an invulnerable state. It was annoying to fight. But once I realized the usual go-to strategy wasn't working, I changed up my approach, and ultimately, this was one of the only parts of the game where I was actually engaging with the combat tools. Fighting Sludge is a battle of trade-offs, getting in attacks while you can and breaking out the block as quick as possible to protect yourself from its uppercut. And once you do take control of Sludge, it's got one of the larger moveset pools in the game, and its basic attacks and uppercuts chain together pretty smoothly. So both in fighting it and using it, I was actually having fun with the combat. And that kind of frustrates me in a way, because with Titans like Sludge and with the late game basic enemies, I can see the potential of this game's combat system, but that's not applicable for most of the game! For a majority of the game, the combat is either annoying or boring, but every once in a while, there's a glimmer of what it could have been. A beat 'em up that, while still on the basic side, is actually fun to master. And it bugs me that the game doesn't end up leaning into this, instead opting for something far less. And speaking of far less, how about we talk about those boss fights? So when I made my worst Crash bosses video, I got a few comments noting how they were surprised there weren't any Titans bosses on the list. Again, at the time, I hadn't beat Titans, so I'd only faced so many of its bosses. And I don't know, I didn't really feel like including Yuctopus or Tiny, but now having beat the game, I see their point. The first boss is the aforementioned Yuctopus, who does have a cool design, but the fight itself is not very notable. You climb the food chain to take control of Yuctopus, then destroy the platforms Cortex is standing on. Pretty straightforward stuff. The next bosses are Tiny and Engine, and frankly, they hardly count as bosses. Both of them are basically just enemy rushes where you eventually take control of a Titan that allows you to either break some walls to chase after Tiny, or destroy some things on the wall to end the encounter with Engine. Tiny and Engine don't even do any attacking themselves, they just kind of hang out until it's all over. And then there's Uka Uka. I had heard stories about how bad this boss fight was, but having now fought him myself, oh, this fight is hot garbage. So Uka Uka makes himself a body with the Evolve Array, and it's up to you to destroy the Evolve Array's 3 main reactors. So you have to hijack a Titan, and then use it to fight and take control of Uka Uka's body, and then use that to destroy a reactor. Do this 3 times to win. The problem here comes down to the overabundance of nonsense that's thrown at you. Remember how I said Crash's toolkit isn't well equipped to deal with more than one Titan at a time? By the final phase, you are dealing with like 5 or 6 of them, not even counting Uka Uka himself. And it's a mix of battlers, who are fast attackers that have both close and long range attacks, and electrics, who can basically blast you from the other side of the room. Oh, and these Titans infinitely respawn, because of course they do. The moment you get control of a Titan, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle just to get to Uka Uka. And that's without mentioning how every few seconds, Uka Uka lets out rapid laser fire that can very easily stunlock you or your Titan to death. There is legit way too much going on by the final phase, and dying to this fight over and over again genuinely left me the angriest I've been in a game in a long time. If I had included a Titans fight on my worst Crash bosses list, it'd easily be this one, and he'd easily be in the top 3. Which now brings us to the final boss against Nina and her giant spider cyborg, Arachnina. And it's basically just a tamer version of the Uka Uka fight. Use a Titan to fight and take control of Arachnina, then use it to blast one of 3 key components of the Duminator, rinse and repeat until all 3 of them are destroyed. This fight can be a bit annoying at times, but compared to Uka Uka, it was a lot more tolerable. But yeah, Crash the Titans boss lineup is, not great. Now beyond the platforming and combat, Titans does have a couple other things up its sleeves. The game has a level rating system based on how many of the basic mooks you beat, how big of a running combo you were able to get, and if you found and destroyed all 3 spy bots in the level. But as far as I'm aware, the level ratings don't change anything. Every level also has one of these mojo challenge rooms, where you're put on a timer to do something like collect enough green mojo, or destroy all the targets, or wipe out all the enemies, stuff like that. I went out of my way to do all of them, and these were fine. Didn't really add to the experience, nor take away from it. Beyond those, the only other gameplay elements are finding hidden voodoo dolls that unlock concept art, and unlocking alternate costumes from defeating enough of a specific enemy. And then basically just wearing the skin of said enemy. Kinda wish there was more variety in the costumes, but what are you gonna do? There is also co-op, but I didn't get anyone to try this out with, so rip. As a whole, Titan's gameplay aspects are, like I said, Every so often, some solid potential or a fun segment comes through, but it's quickly buried by barebones platforming and combat that ranges from repetitive to frustrating. To give some final bits of credit though, I do actually quite like the art direction for the environments. I remember at the start of the level leading to Uka Uka's tree, there was an establishing shot showing the tree base in the distance with the cloudy sunset, and I took a moment to just take it in. It looked nice. The music's also pretty good too. They overall go for more of an atmospheric focus rather than planting earworms, but it works for the feel they're going for. And speaking of audio, while I've already gone into the writing not working for me, I'll give credit that the voice actors are, for the most part, doing their best with the material they've got, and I think that shines through. The only voice that really didn't gel with me was, you probably guessed it, Tiny's. I kinda get what they were going for. Crunch's current voice and personality was a parody of Mr. T, so they wanted to spoof another sports fighter for Tiny, but the Mike Tyson angle just doesn't work nearly as well.
Stop! No more, please! You're just too stupendous and fantabulous!
And while I do think John DiMaggio's voice fits for Uka Uka, I couldn't help but hear his Dr. Draken bleed through most of his performance.
Guards, get in here and destroy this meddlesome bandicoot! Shut that door! I'm not paying to heat the outdoors!
So with all that said, having now finally played through it all, Crash the Titans is not one of my favorites. Once again, I do see the potential it had, and it does shine through occasionally, but overall, it didn't quite nail the execution for me. Now, do I think it's one of the worst Crash games? Oh no, absolutely not. The series has seen far worse than this. But I think if they gave it another go, fleshed it out a bit more, they could make this direction potentially work. Oh hey look, they gave it another go. So in classic Crash tradition with direct sequels, Crash Minor from Mutant released the following year after Titans. Almost to the day in fact. But this time it was taking the Titans formula and trying some different things with it. This was also the first Crash game to be published by Activision, who had merged with the series' previous owner Vivendi Games earlier that same year. And much to my dismay, continue to own the Crash series to this day. But anyway, like I said earlier, I'd actually given this one a go when it was new, specifically the Wii version. It did have a few funny moments, and I remember having a bit of fun playing co-op with my older sister, but again, I overall wasn't a fan of it. But we'll see how this revisit pans out. And once again, I'm going to be playing the PS2 version for this. So the game takes place a year after the events of Titans, with the remains of the Duminator still laying on Wumpa Island. In fact, Coco's trying to rework the robot's eye into a multi-use entertainment system.
It'll play games, watch movies, and dispense butter!
Coco, what is it with you and butter? Once she gets it working, they catch an infomercial about a new multi-use headset called the NV, with a suspiciously Cortex-esque presenter announcing the headsets would be distributed for free to Wumpa Island inhabitants. The Bandicoot family get their own sets, with Coco and Crunch immediately getting enveloped in them, while Crash and Aku Aku have far less luck.
I'll be honest, guys. I don't see what the big deal is.
It doesn't take long to discover, though, that the headsets are mind-controlling devices, mutating Coco and Crunch further and making them go evil. Crash and Aku Aku are able to get Coco free, but Crunch makes a run for it. Presuming this to be Cortex's doing, Coco hacks into his network to find out that, plot twist, the suspiciously Cortex-esque presenter was Cortex all along!
And it's certainly not an evil plan.
I can't believe someone would just lie on an infomercial like that. Actually, having said that, I do want to highlight one of my favorite things about this game's story. As you can probably tell, there's a lot more going on here story-wise compared to Titans, with this whole consumerism commentary angle they're going with, which admittedly it is kind of funny how scarily well some of the satire here ended up aging.
Access any file, talk to your disgusting friends, watch pay-per-view, and Julian fries.
I'm getting up to the minute weather reports. It's hot.
And I'm attending a symposium on the effect of hungry hippos on children. Well, now I'm mad. The best gizmo in ages is evil.
But I want to focus on how this game handles Cortex, specifically in his role as the lead villain. For those who may not know or remember, while Cortex started as the main man in charge in the first two games, his role shifted once Uka Uka was introduced and Warped, being the one secretly in charge the whole time. And while it was a bit much in hindsight, I think it worked and worked. We had this dynamic of Uka Uka being baffled and increasingly angered by things not going to plan, while Cortex was comparatively apathetic, like he had gotten used to the song and dance.
It's funny how history repeats itself. Yet again, Engine has failed to defeat you. For this we must destroy you!
The problem though is that, after Warped, the dynamic kinda stagnated, and not in a spot that really benefited Cortex. Sure, he was enjoyable from a comedic standpoint, but in many future games, he was largely just doing things to appease Uka Uka. He kinda lost his agency as the series' main villain. And I think a lot of the devs working on Crash games at the time were finding that limiting, because a couple of the following Crash games just stopped using Uka Uka altogether, namely Crash Purple, Tag Team, and Crash Boom Bang. Titans reintroduced that Uka Uka dynamic and brought it to a logical next step, but once again, not one in Cortex's favor. But then, with one single scene in Mind Over Mutant, Cortex flips the script.
Cortex, what is the meaning of this? Release me immediately.
I used to run this operation, and it's time I did again.
Genuinely, I love this. He justifies it by saying he needs access to bad mojo energy to fuel the NVs, something Uka Uka's got plenty of, but more importantly, it allows Cortex to finally shine again as the main villain of a Crash game, while also not pretending Uka Uka doesn't exist. If anything, it also adds to Titan's narrative, like Cortex is getting back at Uka Uka for turning on him. I don't know, maybe I'm reading too deep into this, but it's something I really appreciate about this game's story. But anyway, Cortex has been creating NVs for mass mind control, so Crash and Aku Aku, and technically Coco since she becomes playable for co-op, set off to stop him. Along the way, they discover that a lot of the Titans have actually made their own civilizations on Wampa Island. They get help from Nina, who, as punishment for betraying Cortex, was transferred from the Academy of Evil to a public school literally called Evil Public School. They find and free Crunch from the NV's control, and they even get Uka Uka's help in stopping Cortex after they free him from a milking machine. I think it might be time to start talking about this game's writing. So once again, Chris Mitchell is at the helm with the writing. And to give credit where credit's due, I think this game's a lot funnier than Titans. Still not quite to Tag Team's level, and there's still a fair bit of weird humor, like the aforementioned milking machine bit. But as a whole, Mind Over Mutant's comedy is hit or miss, but with a fair few solid hits. Like, no exaggeration, I laughed more in the first 10 minutes of playing than I did across all of Titans.
My pancreas! My beautiful pancreas!
And where'd I get this? Short-term memory loss. Confused. And where'd I get this?
Oh, I'll tell Mom! Who is she anyway?
And that's far from the only funny stuff. There's some genuinely good humor sprinkled throughout.
Crash Bandicoot here! Stop what you're doing and destroy him! Anyone killed in combat will be fired immediately.
Do you think you have what it takes to be a student in evil public school? Well, you don't. Classes are full and we hate new people.
I have found the nemesis. I found them.
Will the student that wrote the Doominator as a stupid name on the office door please report to detention for extermination?
Now the one drawback is that Engine, while still enjoyably voiced by Nolan North, isn't really at his A game this time around, nor is he in the game for very long. But that's okay, because there's one more key character at play in Mind Over Mutant that I haven't mentioned yet. One of the big things about Mind Over Mutant for old school Crash fans is that Cortex's partner in crime this time around is his original partner in crime. That's right, they brought back Embryo in this game, who while yes had made a couple appearances after Crash 2, wasn't really a major player anymore. He was playable in Crash Bash, had a non-speaking role in Twinsanity as one half of a pretty mediocre boss fight, and that was it. But Mind Over Mutant brings him back as a major player, and in terms of the game's funny moments, Embryo steals the show, and it's not even close.
I invented the Evolvo Ray and mutagenetic techniques still used by that treacherous Cortex today. I was in the first game!
His main bit is that, in light of Cortex taking credit for his work on the Evolvo Ray, Embryo has gotten super insecure about getting credit. So now he overcompensates and claims he invented anything and everything.
Over time, the disgusting heroes of this world, which I invented, me, not Cortex, read your Bible, I wrote it, but Dr. Cortex, who says he invented many things, liar! I created Slinkies! Stop playing with them because they're mine! Recycling shall destroy the world, and I, as its inventor, shall get the credit.
Well, actually, with one exception.
Look, Light Bright, I didn't invent this. Bert Meyer did. It's not evil. Why is it in the pile?
Okay, side note, I could probably quote this scene word for word from memory. It is easily the funniest part of the game. But yeah, Embryo's absolutely the highlight of this game's writing, and I think this take on his character left a lasting impression on both fans and later developers, since elements of his Mind Over Mutant personality carried over into the post-revival games.
See this piece of machinery? I invented it!
Yep.
Heck, they straight up directly reference a line from Mind Over Mutant in Crash 4.
Why don't people take me seriously?
Why don't people take me seriously?
On the topic of the writing and humor, you may have noticed the varied art styles as shown in my footage. Well, that's because most of Mind Over Mutant's cutscenes are animated in different art styles. We've got puppet shows, animatrix, motion comics, South Park, Dragon Ball, just to name a few. A common theory I've seen on why they did this was they were poking a bit of fun at the fan response to the Titans redesigns, like they were jokingly running a mile with the idea of them looking different. I have no idea if that's actually true or not, I don't entirely believe it myself, but hey, it does help make each scene stand out from each other. It's almost like one of those reanimated collab projects you see on YouTube, but in the official game, and I think that's just kinda neat. Also, while talking about visuals, let's talk about those character designs again. A lot of them go unchanged, but a couple of them have seen some tweaks, namely the Bandicoots themselves. Crash looks more like a middle ground between his classic design and his Titans design, and I'll admit I think I prefer his Titans look, but this one ain't bad either. That said, what in the world happened with that box art render? I don't even have words for this. As for Crunch, who does appear a fair bit more in this game, his design's quite a lot better. It's a lot closer to his classic look and overall feels more fitting for his character. But the award for the biggest glow up is absolutely going to Coco. No longer are we dealing with her uncanny Bratz bobblehead design. We now have a look with not only much better head proportions, but also an outfit that fits both her cool girl attitude and her being a tinkerer. Genuinely, this is one of her best looks in the whole series. Some of the Titans have seen some tweaks to their designs too. I do kind of miss how prominent the Ratsicle stripes were, but a lot of the other Titans benefit from their design tweaks. On top of that, we got a few new Titans joining the roster, both of which having pretty distinct looks from the rest. We've got the TK, this limbed orb containing a bird embryo. It's weird, but hey, it's sure memorable. And then we've got the Grimly, a ghostly Titan that, I'm gonna be real, looks really cool. It's no wonder a whole area of the game is literally named after them. Speaking of areas, let's talk gameplay, because this game does a lot different from Titans. At its core, it's still a beat-em-up platformer, but it makes a lot of changes to both sides of that, and I want to start with the movement and combat side of things. Most of Crash's moves from Titans are brought back, but with a few tweaks and a couple removals. In the latter case, the dodge roll was taken out, which I rarely used anyway, so fair, but also the whole Aku Aku board sliding mechanic is completely gone. That is kinda surprising, but with how much it overstayed its welcome in Titans, I can see why they opted to remove it. As for tweaks, the mid-air spin glide thing has been reworked into an attack, with Crash plummeting down after a short period. It no longer works as a glide. This admittedly took some getting used to. I was so used to Titans over-relying on it that not having it did feel weird at first, but the level design doesn't really warrant that ability anymore, so I'm definitely not losing sleep over this adjustment. The other move that's been adjusted is the spin attack, which... Can we just play that clip from earlier again? Even something as simple as an audio cue or Crash's model getting more red as you're nearing overusage, I think that would have helped a lot. So guess what they added? On top of it being easier to pull off the spin now, you can still do it the same way as before, but just spinning without tapping square works too. There's both a visual cue and an audio cue when you're on the verge of getting dizzy. This This single-handedly fixes the spin attack, and as a result, I was using it a lot more in Mind Over Mutant, both for clearing things in the environment and for combat, which we'll get back to in a moment. As for new abilities, Crash can now spin into these holes and dig underground, mostly for hidden goodies, but occasionally to get past areas that normally hurt you. These parts are okay. He can also climb around certain walls, speaks for itself. Instead of the dodge roll, you now have a counter roll when fighting Titans, where if you press your heavy attack right before an attack, Crash will dodge and be able to immediately follow up with a counter attack. I didn't end up using it a ton, but it did save me in a pinch a couple times. And easily the best ability of all, you can now pocket Titans. Titans in this game now have expanded movesets, most notably being able to jump, and with that, a lot more use outside of just combat. And to aid in that, you can now store one Titan in your pocket and bring them out whenever you wish. Or if you're currently on a Titan, you can swap between both it and your pocketed Titan. This is super handy, for reasons I'll go into momentarily, but also great if you have a particularly favorite Titan that you want to keep using. In my case, I ended up pocketing a Sludge and kept it around for pretty much the entire last third of the game, only losing him to a stunlock attack in the final level. Which on that note, let's get to the combat. So first major change, no unlockable abilities. You have Crash's entire moveset from square one. So all those attacks I was enjoying using in the endgame of Titans, you have right from the get-go. Mojo now unlocks upgrades to both Crash's attack damage and to the length of the spin attack. But on top of that, every Titan species in the game also has Mojo upgrades. So now there's an incentive to keeping a Titan around rather than just throwing them away in favor of the food chain system, helped by being able to pocket one. So if you've got a favorite you want to make stronger, keep it alive and active as long as you can. Once again, I kept a Sludge for a good chunk of my playthrough. He only appears a handful of times in the shortest area of the game, but all the stuff that made him fun to use in Titans is back, on top of now having a mid-air jump attack. So now you can do this uppercut into mid-air slam down combo, and it's so much fun. Also, using the uppercut on basic mooks is genuinely comedy gold. On top of that, other aspects of the combat have been improved upon so much. The charged heavy attack issues are largely gone, so block breaking's a lot easier to do. Titans also block way less, and that combined with the spin attack being more efficient, makes dealing with crowds a lot less annoying, and they added a Mojo multiplier that keeps stacking so long as you don't get hit, incentivizing actually doing well in the combat. Like, in the grand scheme of things, it's still a pretty basic combat system. You're not going to be getting mad combo videos out of this game. But for both Crash and the Titans, it is way more fun to partake in combat in Mind Over Mutant. That glimmer of what could have been that I saw in Titans, it shines here. Aside from the boss fights, but I'll go into those later. For now, I want to talk about the platforming and level design, because that too has seen quite a few changes. Some for better and some for worse. So the main change made here comes down to the gameplay structure. Titans did a level-by-level linear run-through, but Mind Over Mutant instead goes for a mission-based structure, set in an interconnected world. You're still largely going down linear paths, but all the game's environments are linked together, almost like a Metroidvania of sorts. And I mostly like this approach. So with scrapping the level-by-level structure, there's more opportunity and even incentive to bring Titans from one area to another, especially so now that they have abilities suited to traverse the world more. Ratsicles can now surf in shallow currents and freeze water to make platforms, Sludges can slither through tight spaces, several environments are tailor-made for the Rhino Roller's ball form, making for some of the most fun traversal portions of the game. The new TKs can use their telekinesis to interact with environmental set pieces, the Grimleys can slow down time, to name some examples. Sometimes having a Titan you're not necessarily supposed to have in a given section can provide an alternate way to get through an area, and I think that's pretty cool. There are still a few portions of running with nothing happening, but they're not as common as they were in Titans. And that combined with stuff like climbing, digging, and the Titans-driven portions, the level design is overall more consistently engaging. There's also more off-the-beaten-path portions, and more variety in puzzles and challenges, like platforms that tilt and rotate as you walk across them, with a few areas having these co-op challenges where you and player 2 are supposed to keep the platform balanced while you collect everything. Granted, they are doable by yourself with trial and error, but yeah, these are neat too. That said, there is one drawback with the interconnected world approach, and you probably already guessed it, it's the backtracking. This is more so a problem in the first half of the game rather than the second half, but it's a pretty irritating problem regardless. So Crash's house is something of a central point, with ultimately 4 branching paths from there. 2 of them both take you through Wumpa Island itself, 1 takes you to the frozen Ratsicle Kingdom, and 1 opens up in the Doominator at the end of the game to take you to Cortex's space station. After rescuing Coco, you go to the Ratsicle Kingdom, go through the ice prison, and then you're tasked to find a Rhino Roller from the desert wasteland. So you walk all the way back from the ice prison, through the Rascal Kingdom to go back to Wumpa Island. You go through Wumpa Island, open the path to the Desert Wasteland, do all the story stuff there, take your Rhino Roller out of the Wasteland, all the way back to Wumpa Island, then all the way back through the Rascal Kingdom, past the Ice Prison, to unlock the gate to Evil Public School. Then, after going through Evil Public School and helping Nina, she tells you where to find Embryo, whose junkyard hideout is in the Desert Wasteland. So you walk all the way back from Evil Public School, past the Ice Prison, through the Rascal Kingdom, to go back to Wumpa Island. I'm sure you get my point here. You're going to be retracing some of your steps a lot in this game, and some otherwise fine portions of level design get kind of tiring when you have to go through them multiple times over. Like, there's this part in the Rascal Kingdom where you have to climb to these buttons and push them both to rotate a platform from one direction to another, and I am so glad Titan Powers make it easy to skip this part on revisits. Now that said, I think the devs picked up on how repetitive this process was getting, because they do take steps to mitigate the process in the second half of the game. For example, on your way back from Evil Public School, they place a whole ton of running shoe power-ups that temporarily speed up your movement on the path. The story reason being that Wumpa Island's apparently under attack, so you gotta rush back home. And once you've fought off the attack and gotten the key to the junkyard, the game mercifully teleports you right to the gate in the Desert Wasteland, rather than make you go there on foot. The next two areas are also directly connected, so no backtracking required there. And once you've freed Uka Uka and he sets you on a mission to help him regain his powers, he provides teleporters to each of the main areas of the island to do this. Yep, you unlock fast travel at the very end of the game. Though once you've finished all your fast travel tasks, you do have to go through all of Mount Grimly again to get back to Uka Uka. But then he gives you a teleporter right back to Wumpa Island for the endgame. Man, can you imagine if you had to travel back on foot through Mount Grimly, the junkyard, and the Desert Wasteland? But yeah, while they mostly ease up on it in the second half of the game, the backtracking in the first half does get pretty tedious. And I can see why someone would prefer Titan's level-by-level linear approach over this. I overall prefer Mind Over Mutant's execution of the level design, backtracking aside, but yeah. And then there's the matter of the boss fights, which, yeah, no, still not a fan. Now granted, there's no nightmarish difficulty spikes like the Uka Uka fight in Titans, but instead, the boss lineup this time is all just kinda there. Evil Coco's fight just consists of reflect fiery basketballs, freeze the pool when she jumps out to cool down, attack, rinse and repeat. Evil Crunch shows some potential at first, with using TK to telekinetically throw TNTs at a bunch of turrets, but then you just telekinetically stunlock Evil Crunch and throw him with these saw blades, then take control of him and blast the wall until Embryo falls. The way it's executed, this fight ends super abruptly.
I am the greatest! The greatest! You see.
And finally, you have Cortex himself, who uses Embryo's mutation formula to turn himself into a Titan. Interesting idea on paper, but in execution, you just slow down time as Grimly to keep beating him up, then take control of him, use him for a pretty underwhelming power trip enemy rush, and then push a giant button to end the fight. In hindsight, I probably should have included one of these on my worst Crash bosses list too, but I don't know. All these bosses are just kinda nothing burgers. So yeah, while there are still some pretty rough patches here and there, I think Mind Over Mutant overall is quite an improvement over Titans in the gameplay department, and I end up having a pretty solid time playing through it. Helps that the strong presentation of Titans carries over as well, with Mind Over Mutant having some nicely designed environments. As for the music, I was actually surprised at how much the soundtrack had stuck with me since I first played this game. There were quite a few tunes I instinctively hummed along to. But yeah, as a whole, Mind Over Mutant held up a lot better than I was expecting it to. I guess Kid Me just never really shook off how different it was from the usual Crash style, but now I can confidently say that I like Mind Over Mutant. Not quite one of my absolute favorites in the series, but I think it's a good time. Consider me pleasantly surprised. Now I could theoretically end this video on that note, but in actuality, we're not done just yet. I neglected to mention this earlier, but on top of Titans and Mind Over Mutant being released on a whole bunch of consoles, there were also handheld versions made. Both games got put on the PSP, but those are just scaled down ports, so I'm not going to focus on those. Instead, I'm going to quickly talk about the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS versions. Titans got put on both of these handhelds, courtesy of Amaze Entertainment, which means I'm finally delivering on a setup I made 5 years ago. Now yes, Crash the Titans did end up getting a GBA version, but that one was developed by Amaze Entertainment? These developers are gonna haunt me for the rest of my life now, aren't they? Anyway, point is, I'll save Titans GBA for another time. I am so sorry for taking this long. While Mind Over Mutant only got the DS treatment, courtesy of Toze, a studio with a very long track record dating back to the 80s. Now, unlike the console versions, where I had varying degrees of prior experience going into this video, I had not played any of these versions before, so I was delving into entirely new territory with these. And to cut straight to the point, none of them really left a lasting impression on me. Starting with Titans GBA, it follows pretty closely to the console version story, with a couple changes here and there. The big ones being that Uka Uka reinstates Cortex as head honcho just in time for him to be the final boss, and also that Dingo Dow's among the villains this time, and not with a makeover like the rest of the cast got. I guess his design was just too good to change. As for the gameplay though, it's a side-scrolling beat-em-up platformer, and it's quickly made apparent that this gameplay style was better suited to 3D, because in 2D, it's really boring. Because of the hardware limitations, the already pretty bare-bones platforming and combat from the console version ends up even more so here. As such, you'll mostly just be meandering through with Crash, who's got oddly stiff-feeling movement this time around. You'll occasionally punch a basic enemy and knock him out in one hit, then mash B a bunch to try and stun a Titan and hope they don't stun-lock you in the process, and then take control of a Titan, with all of them having super bare-bones movesets, so there's hardly any distinction between them outside of their R-button special attack. To be honest, it did not take long before I felt like I was just going through the motions with this game. And the game doesn't do much to remedy this as you go through. Even the bosses, most of which having attacks that can easily overwhelm and stun you, so you have to rely on objects to throw or straight up invincibility crystals just so you can have a chance to get some damage in. Like, they're not well designed, and I probably should be more angry about them, but even these really didn't do anything for me. Not even in making me annoyed, which like, I don't like feeling this way about a game, but I was largely just feeling nothing playing through Titans GBA. Now, to give some credit, I do actually like the music. I didn't notice it much while playing the game, but listening to it on its own, some of these tunes are actually pretty good. Special shout out to Engine's boss theme, which they also use for the credits. It kinda slaps. I also want to shout out this unintentionally funny moment of Aku Aku grabbing a piece of paper. Somehow. I guess he runs off VeggieTales logic. But yeah, as a whole, the GBA version of Titans was kind of an in one ear and out the other kind of game. Now, the DS version of Titans does fare a little better. In fact, this version of the game takes quite a different approach, both in its story and gameplay, even from the console version. Story-wise, instead of a Doominator, Cortex is building a Cortex bot, which is basically the Doominator, but it dances. And instead of Uka Uka replacing Cortex with Nina, Nina comes to realize on her own that she doesn't want to be a lackey and sets out to take control of things, trying to sway Engine and Tiny over to her side, and ultimately teaming up with Crash to take down Cortex. It was kinda neat to see things play out this differently from the other versions, but the cutscenes are undermined by one very strange choice.
That pathetic hairball sleeps through anything.
I did not edit that in. This game has a laugh track, and it is very distracting whenever it shows up.
I'm a hench person. No!
You can't change the essential evil plot like that. You're not even on the letterhead.
Oh, sure, I keep trying to kill you, but why dwell on the past? I don't see why you want to bring in someone new.
As for the gameplay, Titans DS isn't a side-scroller, nor is it like the console version. Instead, it's a hybrid of classic-style Crash with the Titans formula. There's crates aplenty, which breaking all of them gets you a gem. Every level has a power crystal you need to find to progress. There's side-scrolling bonus rounds, and the levels go for that traditional hallway-like design of the original games. This is mixed with Titans elements like Mojo being the main collectible, the beat-em-up combat being a thing, and the ability to take control of Titans. And in this game, all enemies are controllable. Anything you can fight can also be used to fight. Now on paper, this sounds like a pretty solid direction to take, but you know how I've said a few times now that just because something's different doesn't automatically mean it's bad? Well, the opposite's true too. Just because something's the same doesn't automatically mean it's good. And as a classic style Crash game, Titans DS is pretty underwhelming. There are a couple ways they spice things up throughout, like giving Nina her own levels where you turn regular animals into the enemies you'll be facing when you get there as Crash. But as a whole, the game doesn't do a whole lot interesting with its level design. May not also be helped by how slow the movement feels, especially when you're using Titans. Combat's also got minimal attack options, so you'll quickly find yourself just kinda mindlessly mashing, or just air slamming over and over again. And with how much health enemies often have, it gets tedious. Also, most attacks have no sound effects, which makes the combat feel rather hollow. And don't forget this is a DS game, so you can bet there's mandatory DS hardware gimmicks. In this game's case, the Titan's special moves are used by doing stuff like tapping or flicking the touchscreen, or blowing into the microphone. Now most Titan's abilities can also be used with the B button, albeit slightly nerfed in a couple cases. And as someone who was using an emulator to record my footage, I'm grateful for that. Overabundant touch controls with a computer mouse kinda sucks. Which is also why the Turtle Titan was the most annoying Titan in the game. It's the game's equivalent to the Rhino Roller, and you can only move it via touchscreen controls. This felt super awkward to do, and the fact there's an entire boss fight reliant on it was incredibly annoying. The other bosses aren't really much to write home about, they're all pretty underwhelming, and in the case of Cortex's fight, drags out way too long. But yeah, while better than its GBA sibling, Titan's DS was just kind of a shrug overall. Having the two eras of Crash gameplay mixed together was a neat idea, but in execution, it results in a kind of mediocre classic Crash game with underbaked Titans combat. And while I could try to be optimistic about the DS version of Mind Over Mutant fleshing these ideas out further, well, Crash Mind Over Mutant for the Nintendo DS was one of the most hollow, brain-numbing gaming experiences I've ever had in my life. And I'm not saying this to be exaggerative for a funny YouTube bit. It genuinely felt like my brain clocked out during my playthrough, leaving my body on autopilot through the rest of the game. I can't say I recall if I've ever felt this way playing a game before, but here we are now. Starting with the game's plot, it's a bare-bones retelling of the console version story, with it starting and stopping at Cortex makes the NVs for mass mind control, go stop him. All the parts that made the console version story as strong as it was are nowhere to be seen. Cortex's glorious moment of re-seizing control from Uka Uka? Nope, gone. Embryo being in the game at all? Nope, gone. And as for the gameplay, Mind Over Mutant DS does not follow in the footsteps of Titan's DS, but instead in the footsteps of Titan's GBA. I have no idea why that was the angle chosen for this game, but it indeed was. And somehow, it's even worse than Titan's GBA. Not only does the movement feel stiff, but the timing for the double jump is so precisely finicky that oftentimes you won't double jump at all, which of course often happened when I needed a double jump. The game also has an egregious case of screen crunch, so very often while you're airborne, you'll have zero idea what's below you or if you'll land safely. And as for the combat, you'll once again find yourself mindlessly mashing with minimal options, and the Titans don't fare much better. This game has the smallest lineup of Titans of any of these games, coming to a total of 5, and they all move slowly and clunkily, also with minimal attack options. The gimmick with them this time around is that collecting mojo while riding a Titan will build towards evolving them, giving them more moves. But I'm gonna be real, I never bothered evolving any of them. I much preferred using Crash to get around levels whenever I could, and most combat encounters were easily dealt with by just mashing heavy attack, especially so once you unlock Crash's disco outfit that buffs his heavy attack. So yeah, didn't take long for me to get bored of this game. As early as the second world, I started just bolting through the levels as much as I could, ignoring the mechanics and obstacles unless the game forced me to engage with them. And none of them were particularly engaging. I can't even say much about the bosses. Each world's boss is a souped up version of that world's Titan, with a couple extra attacks or gimmicks to try and spice things up. Some of these fights ended up a bit annoying as a result, but ultimately my annoyance would inevitably fade away back to nothingness. The one exception was the final boss, which takes the rehashing an extra step by being a giant chimera, a literal hodgepodge of the game's 5 Titans. And this fight was really frustrating. It's tediously long, the Chimera's attacks do insane damage while yours do barely any, it's got these annoying interlude parts with Cortex that just drag the fight out even longer, and once it's near death, it fully regenerates its health, and then will occasionally fly off to do so again during the second half of the fight, requiring it to use the super finicky double jump to try and stop it. This boss legit took me over an hour to beat, and having to restart from the beginning after every cheap death got so tiresome that, I'll fully admit, I ended up using save states on my final run. I was fed up at that point and just wanted to be done with it. If I were to update that worst Crash bosses list, this would easily take the top spot, no doubt about it. So yeah, I didn't really care for the handheld games. Their quality fluctuates on an individual basis, like Titan's DS is definitely better than the other two, but as a whole, I don't feel like I really gained anything from playing these, Mind Over Mutant DS especially. Which again, I really don't like feeling this way about games, or creative works in general, but man. So I think it's suffice to say, I'm pretty mixed on the Titans era of Crash games. But I'm glad I can confidently say that now for reasons other than they're the different ones. It is also kind of funny in hindsight that the one game I had beat and didn't care for before doing this video ended up being the one game I liked out of the bunch. All that to say, if you're gonna play any of the Titans games, I'd personally recommend the console version of Mind Over Mutant. It's a fun time and a funny time.
Paper covers rock, but paper can't stop rocks. It makes no sense!
And to think, these 5 games were where the series had stopped for nearly a decade, delisted mobile games aside. Since then, of course, we got remakes of the Naughty Dog games, a brand new mainline Crash game, and a live service game for some reason. And with Crash currently in the ownership of Microsoft and Activision, the series' future is very much an unknown. For all we know, we may never get another Crash game. But to be perfectly honest, I'm okay with that. For one, the series is still under Microsoft's ownership. Gross. But also, sometimes you just gotta be willing to let go of a series. Nothing lasts forever, and if anything, we've seen plenty of cases of series overstaying their welcome. And while it definitely had its rough patches throughout, I'd say the Crash Bandicoot series overall had a pretty good run. There's a solid dozen games in this series that I'd recommend, and that's a solid track record if you ask me. But yeah, I'm not fretting about Crash's future. Would I like to see new games? Preferably under a different company, but yeah, of course. Am I gonna lose any sleep if there aren't any new ones? Nah. And on a similar note, I am gonna take this time to confirm that, as of now, this will likely be my last Crash video. I know there's a couple games I haven't reviewed yet, like the remakes and Rumble and all the various mobile games, but I think I've had my fill with covering Crash games. Like I said at the start, I've been doing this series marathon for 7 years, and I think this is a good spot to put a pin in it. It's been a wild ride to say the least, and I'm thankful for everyone who's stuck around for this journey of a marathon, but all that said, I think it's time to bring this series of videos to an end.
This isn't the end. I invented endings.
Ah, come on, you knew I had to. Anyway, this has been BenjaMage. Thank you all for watching, and until the next video, have a nice day, everybody.